part two of a two-part series on building a banner ad. The first one was all about setting this thing up so that you built it from the bottom up. There's my first screen of my banner ad. It's going to do some different independent things, then it's going to move to this, and then finally it's going to move to this. And I did this by putting these things inside these folders. Now that I've set this up and I'm pretty comfortable that my pieces don't need to be changed, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to go to Window and I'm going to pull down to Timeline. And there's two different ways that I could make this: frame by frame animation or with the video timeline. I think most of you are going to find that the video timeline is probably the easier one to do, and it's kind of like the parallax thing that we did. So let's just stick with this. I'm going to click on Create Video Timeline. The only downside from doing what we did in the folders over here is that it creates an extra line for each of these, as I have to be able to open up each part independently. But I think that that's just fine. It's probably still, again, to help organize this thing over here as you're working, it's probably the smart thing to end up doing. So now I'm going to come in here, and right now Photoshop has built me the standard kind of 5-second timeline that it just starts with every video, but you can adjust that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the gray folder, and ultimately all of these are automatically running from 0 to 5 seconds. Well, I'm not going to leave that on the screen for 5 seconds, but since I'm building it from the ground up, when I ultimately get to the blue stuff, and maybe I have that start somewhere here after second 2 or somewhere slightly after that, as soon as the blue layer pops on, then it's going to go ahead and cover up the stuff below. So I never really have to worry about where the end is on these things, as long as I'm stacking it with something new on top of it. The white one, I already know that I'm going to have an issue on, is that I want this thing to run longer than 5 seconds in order for the text to be on the screen long enough. So I'm going to do something really quick before I get started on my gray layer, and that's I'm going to move to the white layer, and I'm opening the folder over here for the white layer, and I have multiple pieces. I have 2 blocks of type, I have the squash logo, and I have the white background. And I'm just going to grab the top one of these and I'm going to slide it over here until I get to seconds, until I get to 7 seconds. There I go. And then I'm going to slide this one over. And once I've pulled the first one over, it's going to allow me to kind of have a snap to guide. So it's going to want all the rest of these to pull over to that. And then I'm going to go ahead, as long as I'm here and I have this folder open, I'm going to grab the first one of these and I'm going to say, but I don't want any of these to start until second, maybe 5. So I'm going to do that. If for some reason you're having difficulty scrolling over and back on these, you can always change the view of this. Just be careful of it. And that by moving it to the left, I get to see the increments between here and 1 sec are much, much smaller, so much so that the 10 and the 20 frames have disappeared, because everything else in 1 second is 30 frames a second. So that's why it's split it up into thirds. So this might make it a lot easier for me to drag things around on this. The only thing is then I've lost some of the increments. So I could zoom way in if I wanted to and literally see frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, frame 4, all the way out to 30 frames, which would be the equivalent of 1 second if I slid this way over. But for right now, I'm just going to slide it to here. I'm going to grab each of these and I'm going to say start at second 5. And now, since I'm at second 5 and I'm on this part of the timeline, it's telling me what I'm seeing here. And the white thing is here, but the blue thing is also covering it up. So I'm going to hide, scroll down here until I can hide the white folder. Then I'm going to go ahead and open up the blue folder. And I'm going to say that the blue stuff isn't going to start until maybe second 3. And then I'll slide this one over until it's at second 3. And then for the most part, if I wanted to, I probably am going to zoom back in at least to the point that I can see my 10, 20 frames per second and then see the full second. So maybe I'm only seeing about 4 seconds just based on my screen size here. And now that I'm done with this, again, the blue ones don't start till 3, and the white ones don't start till 5. So if I was to move the play head to the very beginning and hit the play button here, I'm going to see 3 seconds of this screen, 2 seconds of that one, and then 2 seconds of that one. That sounds good. That sounds like a good starting point. So now what I need to do is move on and start to adjust my individual things I'm going to do on each layer. So I'm going to close the white one, and I'm going to go ahead and start at the very bottom with the gray. Okay, so the gray, which is going to last me 3 seconds. Actually, I'm sorry, this is going much longer than that, but just remember, it's going to be covered up by the blue and then ultimately the white. So I never really have to shorten the length of this one to make it end at 3 seconds, because it's going to be being covered up by the blue. So now that I'm sitting here, I'm going to say, okay, cool. The gray is going to start right here, all the way over to the left-hand edge. And by the way, anytime I want to get the playhead back, instead of having to scroll all the way to the end and finding it and picking it up and moving it, I can just come over here. And as long as I don't want to click on one of the individual layers, I just want to click somewhere here by the numbers. It'll give me the playhead back, and I can slide it back all the way to 0. So my gray is going to be on the opening thing. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just temporarily hide. I'm going to move this layer with all this text on it to about 1 minute 20. 1 minute, I'm sorry, not 1 minute, 20. 1 second and 20 frames. So it's like 1 2/3 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and also slide the squash. And I'm going to maybe move it to like second number 1. Yeah, that sounds pretty good to start with. Then I'm going to have this ball. So right now all I have at the opening is this ball. So I could hit play to see what that's going to look like. Boom, there's the squash. Boom, there's the rest of the text. And then it's going to move on to other things. So I'm going to start it back all the way here to 0. Now what I'm going to do with the ball is I got to open up the individual layer for the ball to be able to do something with it. If the object is not set as a smart object, my options underneath are position, opacity, and style. And the top one is normally what we're changing on the animation. On the other hand, when I have text, it's automatically the same equivalent as a smart object. So it's set as transform. So I'm going to go ahead and try to do this one. I think I'm going to find it easier to actually do if it's also set up as a transform function, which means I need to come back over here to my layers, go to my ball layer, click on it, and pull down and tell it to convert to smart object. And then I can go ahead and collapse the layers palette. And now I have the word underneath ball. I also have the word transform, which is good. So what I'm going to do with the ball is I'm going to move it off the screen, but kind of up here toward the top. And the first thing I'm going to do is, with my video playhead at 0, I'm going to go ahead and click the transform button, and I'm going to hit the return. And then I'm going to move it over a little bit, because a lot of what I want to do here, I want to get done in the first maybe 10 frames, maybe 15 frames. So I'm going to move it just a little bit. And then as I'm sitting here, I'm going to hit Command T, which is the shortcut for edit free transform. And then I'm going to grab this thing and I'm going to slide it down maybe to about here. And then as soon as I hit return, it's going to automatically make a second dot to tell me, okay, at this point, this is where the thing is going to be. Then I'm going to move it over a little bit more, and I'm going to hit again Command T, and I'm going to slide this thing over to here. And I'm going to hit the return button, and it drops another dot down. And then I'm going to hit Command, I'm going to slide the timeline over a little bit, and I'm going to hit Command T, and I'm going to slide it up to here, and hit return. It's dropping one more dot. And then I'm moving it a little bit further over, and I'm going to hit Command T, and I'm going to go ahead and slide this time off the side of the page. And I'm going to hit return to activate the free transform. Again, that's the only tool in Photoshop that after you make a movement, you have to hit the return button to say, yes, I really meant to do that. Okay, and now that I've done that, I'm going to go back and just see what this looks like. So I slid the playhead all the way back to 0 and I hit go. And that's kind of what I had in mind. Ball bouncing around, but maybe it's going too fast. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to grab each of these dots. I'm going to slide maybe this one over to 20 frames. And I'm just going to try to even these guys out a little bit. Obviously, these shouldn't necessarily be exactly even. For example, if this is kind of a short throw from here to here, that actually could be a closer distance. The longer the ball has to bounce, I probably want that set up a little bit longer. So in some ways, right now if I hit this, it's almost as if that big movement from here to here, which is really this guy, should be a little bit longer than maybe the throw from here to here. But this is not something we need to worry about a whole lot. So one more time, I'm going to do this. You can tell the speed of those things is different, and that is partially because of how long the throw is or how long the bounce is and where these things are spaced. But I'm completely happy with what's going on there. So I'm going to go back and grab the video playhead and I'm going to put it in here. And what I'm going to do with the word squash is I'm going to actually slide this a little bit further back to the left, almost as if it's still starting to happen when the last of the ball is bouncing off the whole thing. And I'm clicked on the squash layer. And I'll move the video playhead to here. And I'm going to do something pretty similar to that. I'm going to open up the squash caret. And I'm going to hold the shift button down. I'm going to start to move this up until it's off the page, but I'm holding the shift button down so it doesn't wobble left or right. By doing this, it should move straight up. And didn't want to do that, so let me try that again. Okay, so now it's off the page, not by a whole lot, but just enough until that part of the letter disappears. And I'm going to do something pretty similar. I'm going to go ahead and click the transform button, and I'm going to hit return to activate the transform. Then I'm going to move the video playhead over to the right a little bit. And I'm going to hit Command T to activate this, and I'm going to start to slide this down holding the shift button. And I'm going to pull it all the way down until even the serif on the Q is gone. So it's sitting here about like this. And I'm going to hit return. And then I'm going to go ahead and slide this over a little bit more. And I'm going to go ahead and hit Command T, and I'm looking up at the top menu where I can see the height and the width, and I'm pulling down on the height until it's 50%. Not 50% maybe, but I'll pull it down to about here. Actually, it's not working exactly like what I had in mind. Do this. Hit return. I'm going to move the video playhead over a little bit more. This time I'm going to hit Command T and I'm going to slide it up, but I'm going to slide it beyond the 100% so that I'm actually stretching it out quite a bit. I'm going to move it back down here just by tapping the down arrows until this is sitting right on the bottom line. And I'm going to hit return. I'm going to move it just a little teeny bit more. Command T. And this time I'm going to start to slide the thing up. And I'm going to move it most of the way toward the top. And I'm going to hit return. And then I'm going to move it one more time. I'm going to hit Command T, and I know I've stretched it out some. I'm going to pull it back down a little bit, and I'm going to hit return. So let's see what this is looking like now. All the way back to the beginning of the playhead, and I'm going to hit play. There's my ball. Okay, I'm going to hit the command minus sign so that I can end up seeing this whole thing. Slide it all the way back to the beginning. Again, hit play. So my ball bouncing, I would squash, I had it bounce down, and that's why I went ahead and shrank it vertically. Because when it hit the bottom, I'm trying to make it look like it got flattened out, and then I'm having it spring back up, and then when it flies back to the top of the screen, it's going to return to kind of more of its original proportion. So that's good. So this is here. Now I'm getting to see my squash move down, bounce, stretch up. And when it gets to the top, it's going to return kind of to its normal shape. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go take a look to see again, where did I have my blue starting? There, that's fine. So I'm going to say right after the squash thing is set up, I need to go find my layer for the text. And I'm going to have this start right here at this point. And I'm going to say that once again on this one, I'm also going to hit the, I'm going to slide it off the edge of the page at this point. I'm going to hit the return, hit the transform button, and then I'm going to move the video timeline over just a little bit further, so that this moves a little bit slower. And I'm going to hit Command T, and I'm going to slide this block of text until it's where I wanted it to be on the document. Do that right there, and I'm going to hit the return button, and then I'm going to just see what that looks like. Ooh, that moved kind of slow, so I'm going to grab this dot and I'm going to actually move it back to the left a little bit. I don't want it to like fly onto the screen, but I think it was moving way too slow compared to everything else. Let's say I'm happy with that. So I'm going to let that sit on the screen for a little bit before we start the blue layer. But I'll be honest, I think that it's going to probably be on there too long. But I'm going to close the gray layer up and just assume that we're kind of done with it. Go to the blue layer. And I'm actually going to say, why don't we actually move this back? It's like 2 seconds, 20 frames. And what we're going to do on this one is I'm going to have this actually slide from the right to the left to cover the white background. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying that at this point right here, right where I'm having this thing start on the playhead, I actually want this to be off to the side of the page. And I'm going to hit position, because I have no need to convert this to a smart object, so just leaving it as position is fine. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to slide over. If I'm at 2 seconds, 20 frames, yeah, 10 frames would probably be pretty good. So I'm going to slide this over to about here. And I'm going to click on this, and it's not going to want to move when it's off the edge of the page. So now that I've slid it over with the arrow keys and I can grab it, I can slide it all the way over and cover up this. And now I see it automatically created another dot right there. So let's just see real quick what that's doing. Oh, okay, cool. It's going to let that thing slide on over as a transition from one to the next. That's great. In a lot of ways, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to move this to the beginning of the text, which I have right here. Click on the text layer, open the caret for it. Since it's text, it's transform rather than position. That's fine. I'll say that on this one, where I want the position to be is for it to be off the screen. I'm going to hit transform and hit return. And then I'm going to move it over about the same 10 seconds, or 10 frames, I'm sorry. And then I'm going to hit Command T. And I'm going to drag this over, and I'm going to let go and hit return. So in a way, by doing this as kind of 2 different steps, you should end up seeing the blue slide, and then the text follows, that it's not at one junction. Sounds great. So a decent amount of text, I'm going to let that sit on the screen for a little bit. Let's see if this is actually too long. Maybe. But I think that we'll just leave it for now. So I'm kind of done with the blue layer. Now let's go to the white layer. I'll move to the beginning of where it's going to appear, where it goes from the blue to boom. And I'm going to go ahead and say I want to do something different on this. Actually, I'm going to move this to 10 frames over. And I'm going to grab the white. I'm going to slide it over here. And I'm going to do something kind of different rather than trying to do a move or anything like that. I'm going to come up here and kind of hover on this icon. This is a transition. And I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to say what I want is a fade. Now, I don't remember exactly what the default is for Photoshop. My guess is it's probably ½ a second. And I think that's kind of slow, so I'm going to change this to be 0.25 or ¼ of a second. And again, I got to this thing by just clicking on this. I'm going to go back and click on my white layer, click on the fade, make sure that's set at 1/4 of a second, and then I grab the word fade. I'm just going to use the top one, and I'm going to dump it at the beginning of this. So what that's going to end up looking like is the white is going to fade in and cover up the blue stuff. So that's fine. So I'm going to go ahead and start then with these other objects, and I'll just say that I'm not going to do any kind of transition with the text. Let's take one look at what that would look like. So I'm at the blue, slide over, fade into white, and then boom, the text pops up. That's great, except I think maybe it's showing up a little bit too fast. Actually, I'm going to leave these guys here, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to move the white even further to the left. I think it feels to me like it needs to, the white needs to kind of happen first and get all the way to white before that text pops on up. Okay, so now that I've done that, the only other thing that I'm going to do, I'm just going to let the text appear. Unless you wanted to, then you could also do the same type of thing. Click on this layer and say fade, let go. Click on this layer, fade and let go. Sounds good, but if for some reason I wanted to get rid of one of these, all that I end up having to do is I could click on the actual icon where the fade is, and when it's selected like that, I could hit delete. And so only the fade would be on this one, and it would not be on this one. I think it's going to look funny, but that just means that if you put a fade on something, you can get rid of it. So I'm going to go back and click on this text layer, click on this, drag the fade, and let go. And I'm going to go ahead and click on the logo, and I'm going to say not only am I going to put a fade on it, but I'm also going to change the position of it. So I'm going to open up the logo. I will go ahead and I think it's probably easier to do these with the transform function. So, okay, that already is a smart layer, that's fine. So not only is it appearing with the fade, but I'm also going to say, look at this time, right when the thing starts to appear up, I'm going to have you be actually off the page. Let's get cranky, so I'll just click the position on it. Nope, I think I'm just going to say forget it. Get rid of that. This is what I wanted it to be. Okay, so now let's just go see what this whole thing looks like. You probably will, since I'm just previewing it, slide this little indicator down so that I can see my entire set of my timelines all the way from the beginning all the way to here at 7 seconds, all on the same panel right here. Move the playhead back to the very beginning. Hit play. Ball, squash, text, blue, white. Neat. And if for some reason I thought that there was any weakness in this whole thing, I'll slide it back, play it again. Again, if for some reason I thought that maybe some of the panels weren't showing up for a long enough time, I could either cut the amount of text that I had on the screen, I could go ahead and slide this from 7 seconds on out to 8 seconds or something like that. Most of these video loop throughs, they do run 6 or 7 seconds. 8 would be okay. 12 or 15 would be way too much. For some reason I didn't like that. I think that the opening thing, the word squash in that first screen, possibly is held too long compared to some of the other ones. So I could always go back and reopen up the blue and just say, you know what, if the blue wasn't long enough, I could move the blue to the left and then the text to the left. And these dots are gonna, for like how fast that transition is, they're gonna stay in place. So I could move this entire thing and these two dots, keeping that spacing would stay in the same place. But I either have the ability now to change these by layers or to come out to the very end of this with all this text and slide this further on over. And now that I'm done, what I probably want to do in this case, I'm going to do a save as, so that I've just got this, just in case you later decide that you want to go back and make a change. But then once I've saved it, so I have my original without any of the timeline stuff, and now I have the second copy that has the timeline stuff moving, then I'd be going to File, and I would be going to Export, Render Video. Another video that we've seen had somebody showing how to render a video, and they were talking about changing all of these things so that you could have transparency. But if you don't need to do that, all you need to make sure this is set up to is using the Adobe Media Encoder format of H.264 and leaving everything else the same, and then just click the render button, and it will take a little bit of time to be able to render the file out, and that's it.